Welcome back to our podcast on music history for Sir Winston Churchill. Last week, we started to look at plain chant, and the week before that, medieval music in general. And we touched on the fact that most music in the medieval period, at least that we have record on, occurred in the church because they wrote it down. They were the educated. Today we're going to start to look at music in the court, or that's the places dominated by the nobility, and look at the troubadours and trouvères. In this we'll hear a troubadour song called La Douce Voix. Then we'll also start in on the evolution of polyphony, listening to a piece of Organum by Peritense. So, without any further ado, let's jump in. Music at court. Over the long span of the Middle Ages, the kings and barons gained political power at the expense of the church. They also assumed leadership in artistic matters as well. The princely courts joined the monasteries and cathedrals as major supporters of music in the later Middle Ages. Troubadours and trouvère songs. Large groups of court songs have been preserved from the 12th and 13th centuries, the age of chivalry. The noble poet-composers of these songs, who we are told also performed the songs themselves, were called troubadours in the south of France and trouvères in the north, and minnesingers in Germany. Minne meaning ideal or chivalric love. Among them were knights and princes, even kings, such as the most famous of all chivalric heroes, Richard I of England, the Lion-Hearted. Troubadour society, but not trouvère society, also allowed for women troubadours, such as Countess Beatrice of Dia, Maria de Ventadorn, and others. Perhaps some of these noble songwriters penned the words only, leaving the music to be composed by jongleurs, the popular musicians of the time. The music is relatively simple, just a tune in most cases, with no indication of any accompaniment. We hear of jongleurs playing instruments while the trouvères sang. Perhaps they improvised some kind of accompaniment, or played a drone, such as we heard in Colomba Aspexit last week. There are some very beautiful troubadour poems, crusader songs, laments for dead princes, and especially songs in praise of the poet's ladies, or complaints of their ladies' coldness. One interesting poetic type was the alba, the drawn song, of a knight's loyal companion who has kept watch all night and now warns him to leave his lady's bed before the castle awakes. Another was a pastourelle, a typically unsuccessful seduction dialogue between a knight on horseback and a country maid. So, we're going to look at one of these songs by a gentleman named Bernard de Ventadorn. He lived from about 1135 to 1164, so just under 60 years. This troubadour song is called La Douce Voix. Bernard was one of the finest troubadour poets and probably the most important musically. Other troubadour and trouvère songs were derived from some of his pieces. Originally of humble background, he came to serve the powerful Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine, wife of King Henry II of England. Like hymns and folk songs, troubadour songs set all their stanzas to the same melody, resulting in what is called strophic. So that's very similar to what we have today, where all of a popular song's verses would have the same melody. Only in their day, there was no chorus. There was just that repetition. Often each stanza is in an A prime B form, and this happens to be in Mixolydian mode as well. The performance on the recording stresses secular aspects of Bernard's song. It sounds far removed indeed from the spiritual atmosphere of Hildegard von Bingen that we heard last week. The language the troubadours spoke and wrote was Provençal, now almost extinct. It combines elements of Old French and Old Spanish. So, the troubadour songs were in the language of the normal people, whereas what was coming out of the church was almost all in Latin. So, let's have a listen to Bernard de Ventadorn, La Douce Voix. Once again, I will put the translation up on the screen. The Estampie. There also survive a very few, dances from the same court circles that produced the chivalric trouvère repertoire. Called Estampie, they are unassuming one-line pieces in which the same or similar musical phrases are repeated many times in varied forms. This suggests that these Estampie may have been written down jongleur improvisations. Estampie are marked by lively and insistent rhythms in triple meter. Modern performers often add a touch of spice with the help of percussion instruments. This is a modest beginning to the long and important history of European dance music. We'll pick this up again in a future podcast. 3. The evolution of polyphony. Polyphony, the simultaneous combination of two or more melodies, must have arisen in early Europe because people took pleasure in the sensuous quality of music, in the rich sounds of intertwining melodic lines, and the resulting harmony. Many cultures all over the world have developed some kind of improvised polyphony that is made up on the spot without the aid of written scores. If you and someone you know can sing in thirds together, this is improvised polyphony. Some other cultures also have traditions of complex, pre-planned polyphony involving little or no improvisation. We only know about early European polyphony from its manifestations within the church. For, once again, all we know about very early music comes from the writing of monks and other clerics. And within the church, the sensuous aspect of polyphony had to be rationalized away. Polyphony was seen as a way of embellishing Gregorian chants, that is, as yet another way of enhancing the all-important services. Organum. The earliest type of polyphony is called organum. First described theoretically in treatises around 900 CE, actual organum has survived in musical notation from about 1000 CE. Organum consists of a traditional plain chant melody to which a composer, singer, or improviser has added another melody or counterpoint sung simultaneously to the same words. The history of organum between 1000 and 1200 CE provides a fascinating record of growing artistic ambition and technical innovation. We can trace a number of steps. Originally, each note of the chant was accompanied by another single note in the counterpoint, or added melody. The two melodies moved along with the same distance or interval between them. The rhythm of this early so-called parallel organum was the free rhythm of Gregorian chant. Soon, the counterpoint was treated more independently. It would sometimes go up when the chant went down, and vice versa. Next, the counterpoint began to include several notes at the same time as each single chant note. The embellishment process was growing richer, as more and more notes were crowded in, making richer and richer melodies. The single chant notes were slowed down to surprising lengths, sounding finally like long drones. The next step was a radical one. Two counterpoints were added to the chant, which required much more skill from the composer, since the second counterpoint had to fit both the chant and also the first counterpoint. Equally radical was the idea of introducing definite rhythms controlled by meter. First, the counterpoints and then the chant itself were set in lively rhythms. Fragments of the chant, too, were sometimes isolated and repeated many times, one after another. Organum of these last highly developed kinds flourished at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, which was built slowly over the period from 1163 to 1235. The name of some composers of the so-called Notre Dame school are recorded. Master Léonin and his follower Peritense, who they often called the Great. Peritense astonished 13th century Paris by creating impressive organa for as many as 4 simultaneous voices. So we're going to have a listen to Peritense's Alleluia diffusa es gratia. Many organa were composed for services devoted to the Virgin Mary, the patron saint of Notre Dame Cathedral. Our example is added to a chant for the Mass, Alleluia diffusa es gratia. At first the chant is sung in the usual Gregorian way. The whole chant is much longer, but this opening Alleluia section is the most important part. It comes back twice before the chant is over, and the most beautiful as well. The joyful exclamation Alleluia is often set to melisma, as we have already seen, which is multiple notes for a single syllable. Note how the melisma on the syllable lu rouses itself and then springs up still higher and how this melodic climax is balanced by a quiet, sinking, low climax in phase 3. After this relative excitement, phrase 4 stays within a calm range of 4 notes. Then the organum starts. The voices begin with a strange, static harmony which starts to sway, as it were, when the upper voices intertwine in various triple time rhythms of the kind shown here. They are singing long melismas on the syllable di, fu, sa, and so on. Underneath, the lowest voice is singing the rest of the chant, but no longer in the characteristic free rhythm of the Gregorian chanting. Sometimes the chant plods along in a stiff, regular rhythm, like at about the minute and 22-second mark. Sometimes it's slowed down enormously, like at the 37-second, 1 minute and 7-second, and 1 minute and 33-second mark. At these points, the chant is unrecognizable. It has been reduced to a series of lengthy drones. The plain chant has become a sort of musical scaffolding, no longer perceivable as a melody. It is simply a constructive element supporting the ecstatic upper voice melodies, which are the main focus of interest in this music. It ends with a huge melisma on de and a sort of shudder on the final syllable us. Then plain monophonic chanting is resumed as the original Alleluia music returns for the words in aeternum, with another big melisma on The melody is then repeated for the word Alleluia. So we'll end off today there. I'll put the recording of this up with the translation as well. So this is the Peritense Organum Alleluia diffusa e gratia. See you next week.